Hello, and welcome to Appleton Engaged. I'm your host, Timber Smith, DEI Coordinator for the City of Appleton.
And I am Andy Anam, the Communications Manager for the city.
And Appleton Engaged is a podcast that explores the many people, organizations, and resources that make our community a great place to live, work, and play. So whether you're a longtime resident or just getting to know Appleton, join us as we learn more about our community together.
Today we have a special guest on the episode who will talk about a program where he will touch upon things like the outdoors, which should be accessible and engaging and safe to everyone, no matter who you are.
Oh, facts. And I'm really excited about this. I'm excited about it, because I think this is a topic that it doesn't really get talked about, but it's a super valid topic. It's a topic that it feels close to me, but even more so, I'm excited about who our guest is because I've actually got to see them present on this particular topic, and it hit home. It hit the right places. So this week's guest is Kyle Armstrong, Program Director for Inclusion in the Outdoors. Hey, Kyle.
Well, hey, Timber and Andy.
How are you doing today?
I am doing A-okay.
Awesome. Are you ready to jump in?
I sure am.
Okay. Kyle, can you please tell us about yourself and your association with Appleton and the Fox Cities region?
Yeah, so I'm a Neenah farm boy, and I was raised down there on the south side of Neenah, went through Neenah High School, proud Rocket, and then I wandered off for a while, went off to Minneapolis for school at the University of Minnesota, wandered even farther away to go to Taiwan, taught English, studied Chinese, and then finally I came back a few years ago, and that's when I started some of this work, and been going at it hard ever since.
Oh, wow. So you went international, and you still boomeranged back here.
That's right.
That happens. All right, that's awesome. Okay, well, Kyle, let's start talking about the resource. So can you please tell us about the resource?
Yeah, so Inclusion in the Outdoors is a program of the Multicultural Coalition, Inc. And Inclusion in the Outdoors aims to make a Fox Valley where everyone feels welcomed and included in our outdoor spaces, regardless of identity, regardless of circumstances. And we've been at this now for a couple years. Started with really just a question of how can we, better learn about how people feel in the outdoor spaces, depending on their identity, has now become a program where we're really trying to implement practices that are going to make things better, make it so that people can enjoy and use outdoor spaces the way that they should be able to.
I want to take a step back and go, how did this even come up? Now, I'll be the first to say, as a person of color, there's certain outdoor spaces that I feel I'm cautious about. I don't necessarily have immediate safety or the feeling of safety, not that they're not safe. But how did this even become?
Yeah, well, what you just said with the feeling of safety, that's what this is really all about. And it's the perception of safety is just as important as any reality because, it doesn't matter what the facts are on the ground. If people don't feel safe, they're not going to go there. They're not going to do something. We've got to be able to create that feeling of safety.
Correct.
And that was the topic of a talk that took place about almost 4 years ago, hard to believe, at the Fox Cities Trails Summit. And that talk from noted Black author, naturalist, photographer Dudley Edmondson spurred a local effort to look into outdoor inclusion and what it means for us to create inclusive outdoor spaces, and which is something that we haven't really probed a lot, or hadn't probed, at least at that point. And I think, like a lot of areas, a lot of people, 2020 was a year when a lot of questions got asked about a lot of long-held assumptions, and this was one of them. And so from that event, a few notable community members, Dave Horst and Carolyn Day Rosier at the Community Foundation, David Weiss, who was then at the Brigade in Neenah, and some other really key folks in the area. They came together and they said, okay, what can we do about this? What are the facts on the ground right now for how people feel in the area, and what can we do about it.
So when we talk about the safety and accessibility, sometimes safety comes and interchangeably used with the law enforcement, and people may say, "Hey, it is the work of or area of the law enforcement." So when you talk about the safety, what do you mean? And when we talk about the inclusion, what exactly it looks like for the people who still wonder, it's just an outdoor space and nature belongs to everyone. So what's your take on that?
Mm-hmm. That's the first thing that a lot of people who have been working in the outdoors industry for a while will say. They say nature, green space, outdoor areas are inherently open and free to everybody. What is the problem? And I even had people say, well, nature doesn't discriminate.
Right.
And that overlooks a really complex web of history and culture that shapes how people behave and how people feel. And the barriers that people face in accessing all sorts of things across their community. And again, I'll kind of allude to the questions of access and identity that have been raised now a lot in the last few years, and should have been raised a lot earlier. And when it comes to the outdoors, ironically, like all these other places, you mentioned law enforcement. There's the paradox of law enforcement for communities of color, especially, and for a whole host of marginalized communities, where those law enforcement professionals can actually make some people, due to really complicated histories of oppression, feel less safe. Now, that's not the whole story, but that is one part of it. So I can give a kind of a generic example. Let's talk about a city park. And let's say that some longtime residents see a group of black youth doing they're playing basketball, but they're being loud. They're maybe they're just behaving in a way that makes those folks feel uncomfortable. Those longtime residents, and we've had cases like this throughout the valley where then the police get called for suspicious activity. Those kids were just having fun. They were just using the park, but they made a resident uncomfortable, and now the police are called. Now those youth are uncomfortable and may be in danger because of that interaction. So that things like that cascade and create a sense now that, well, maybe those kids aren't going to go back to that park. Maybe they're not going to go back to any park. Now that's just one example, one type of interaction that can shape these feelings. But that gives kind of the example of what can be for one person a sense of safety can actually be a sense of danger for another.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that there was some research done because I got to go to that presentation, and I'm going to assume that's where some of this understanding has come from. Can you share a little bit about what was shared from that research?
Yeah. So
just broad overview.
Sure. I won't give you too many stats. Don't worry. So the immediate action that came out of the conversations in 2020 was an AmeriCorps grant to research the question of how can we make our outdoor spaces more inclusive for our marginalized communities. And we ended up focusing on BIPOC, that's Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and LGBTQ plus communities, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender plus. And I did a survey. I did some focus groups, some interviews with local leaders, folks with lived experience with these things. And some of the broad outcomes or the broad conclusions that I reached were, one, that there definitely are some disparities in how people feel about outdoor spaces based on their identity. So we saw that, one, in terms of activity alone, our BIPOC folks reported doing less outdoor activity in fewer spaces and fewer varieties of activities in those spaces at less frequency in an average month compared to their white peers. We also saw that both our BIPOC respondents and our LGBTQ plus respondents reported more barriers and fewer incentives to engage in outdoor activity on a regular basis. And one of the things that was frequently cited for them was discrimination, whether racism, transphobia, or homophobia. And so that safety part came out definitely in that part. So those were a couple of the specific findings from those respondents. And also some broad strokes were just that there's a whole deep history behind this, going all the way back to colonization. We don't have time for that. That would be a multi-year series maybe, but there are the whole reasons throughout our history as a country that people of color LGBTQ plus people have been excluded from intentionally or incidentally from outdoor spaces. And through the decades, even the centuries, that has added up to where we are now. That was another important part. And the last part was that our outdoor professionals, our nature centers, our parks and rec departments, so many of them, their mission is to be accessible for all.
Yes, I do truly believe that.
Mm-hmm. I believe it too. And it's a matter of education to help them understand how people feel and why they might not be reaching all. And so that led into some different recommendations.
Okay. So what are some of the recommendations? Can we ask that?
You certainly can.
All right.
So one of the recommendations based on some feedback that we got was that what we call affinity groups are really important. And that means that, having people be able to go out with a shared identity into a space together is really important for that sense of safety. I had, Black youth straight up say to us, I don't feel comfortable out in public where there are white people. And that's a really profound thing for us to ponder. I mean, I think that would shock a lot of people, but that is their reality. That is how they feel. And so when we can create activities and spaces where people can come together with a shared identity, they are going to feel safer. And so one of our goals has been to facilitate those kinds of outings, those kinds of experiences. So that was one of our recommendations was, to really consider, targeted programming where we can get people together with a shared identity. Another thing was that we need to support our outdoor professionals as they learn about these issues and implement practices and policies that are going to help facilitate inclusion. And that it needs to include, cultural competency training, that needs to include, just the literature and resources on how things are going, and we need to provide the funds if there are capital expenditures that need to be part of this. Some other recommendations included some deep kind of culture level shifts, and these are things that are beyond the scope of any one program or person in the area. But when leaders in our communities see discrimination and hate, we need to call it out, because so much of what we're talking about with inclusion in the outdoors, it's on a community and cultural level. If people don't feel safe in public places, especially our common public spaces like parks, sidewalks, trails, that's not just a reflection on those specific spaces, that's a reflection on the whole community and the kinds of feelings that there are existing for those people with those identities. And that's just one small section of the recommendations. And others included, having more inclusive education about the history of our outdoor spaces, especially Indigenous history, and the history of people of color, LGBTQ people who came before and who really did enjoy and were pioneers, or just, people who just, got a kick out of being outdoors. Because we know when we look back at the history of advertising for outdoor industries, that it has been very much so a straight, white, male, able-bodied, masculine person who has been depicted as the outdoorsy person. And so that then gets internalized by so many people. And so to put out positive images, positive stories of people from marginalized identities enjoying these spaces, and to have them in positions of leadership in organizations and facilities that are, giving us these outdoor resources, these outdoor spaces, that's huge. And, when we're at these spaces, can we have music from different cultures? Can we, have things translated so that it's accessible for our significant non-English speaking population here? Can we look at how those facilities, those professionals can do proactive outreach to these communities? Because so often, I think our outdoor facilities, and nature professionals, they're just saying build it or preserve it, and they will come. And I think that's been the philosophy for a while. And we need to say, okay, you know what? If we are missing people, if we have, these sections of the community who are not participating and don't feel like, for whatever reason that they can or want to, let's do some proactive outreach. Give them that explicit invitation that has been missing for so long.
Yes. I also like what you said about the shared identity. But where my mind went with shared identity right away was Cub Scouts. I think the one time that I did any type of outdoor camping-ish activity was Cub Scouts. And otherwise, without my troop, I think I would have been scared to death to go out there and do that, and not necessarily have felt invited out there either to go out there and do the things. So what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
So my question would be, so how do you do the outreach? Do you meet the park and rec leaders who have the, capacity to make those changes in the park? And if it is so, is it only limited to Fox Cities region, or do you do outreach beyond that?
So, we're engaging with folks across the state because there's kind of a limited network of folks who are really focused in on this issue, but it's a strong network and it's building. So, we've been engaging with those folks across the state, but I would say that our programming area really, and this is based largely on the MCI organizational programming area, is really Winnebago, Outagamie, and Calumet counties. Now, that's not to say that if somebody approaches us from a different county that we're going to turn them down. That's just saying that that's where our outreach is focused for inclusion in the outdoors itself.
So has there been a success story you would like to share, like where a constructive step has been taken to make those little changes, but significant changes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when we talk about those changes, I think one that comes to mind for me, and this is one that I hope is we see more and more across the community, and in fact, we've seen it here at City Hall in Appleton, is converting single-user, gender-segregated restrooms to all-access or all-gender restrooms. In many cases, all it takes is a sign swap. And the success story that we have to share is at Boo-Bolt's Nature Reserve. So they have a beautiful facility that was built about 10 years ago or less, but there are 2 outdoor trail restrooms were both single user and they were gender segregated. We had a male and a female. And so, in some conversations with folks at Boo-Bolt's, I said, hey, why is it this way? And what would it take to change those into 2 all gender restrooms? And they very quickly, they realized that it would be pretty easy. And I think the total cost for them to buy 2 new signs and swap it out was like $60. And now those restrooms are easily accessible to folks who identify as transgender, non-binary, and quite frankly, it's more efficient for folks. If you get you talk about a Boy Scout troop, you get a Boy Scout troop lined up all at the male restroom and nobody's going to use the girls' restroom. Does that really make any sense? So that's a little thing. That's a little concrete thing that a lot of facilities can do to make things more inclusive for our LGBTQ community, but also make it a more efficient facility for everyone.
Yes, and you're right. A sign swap.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Great solution there. I feel like earlier you said there might be another story that you might have for us. Is there another story you'd like to share with us at this time?
Well, there's a few stories. One that I will say just that really drove home for me the kind of the concerns of safety. I talked to a man who lives in Green Bay, a black man, and he talked about his sense of safety in outdoor spaces. And I will say that inclusion in the outdoors, we take a very broad view of outdoor spaces. We are not talking about the outdoors with a capital O. The great outdoors, the forests, the national parks. It's not just that. And we have to recognize that outdoors spaces that people need to be able to feel comfortable and use, that's the sidewalks, it's the city parks, it's even, our walkways to our businesses, all of these things. And so this man talked about, when he drives from Green Bay to La Crosse on Highway 29, he does not stop. He drives all the way through because he does not feel safe getting out of his vehicle in a small Wisconsin town at a gas station as a large black man. And he is concerned for his safety and just for the inconvenience of being identified as a threat and having a whole situation arise. And so that drove home to me the necessity of, just creating that culture of inclusion and helping people, feel safe. Now, I'll give a positive story of the outcomes of one of our programming too. Inclusion in the outdoors has started leading outings, and so we will basically facilitate, coordinate the logistics of and pay for an outing for a group that comes to us. And last year we did an outing for the STAR program at the Boys and Girls Club here in Appleton. And our outing went out to Hartman Creek State Park. We booked a pavilion, had all sorts of water, sport equipment rented out. We had a barbecue. It was a great time. And, I started asking some of the kids, the scholars, I should say, had they ever been to a park? And I think about half of them never been to a state park. And another half of them had never been to a lake, a freshwater lake. They'd never been in a lake. And so we had them swimming, kayaking, paddleboarding, all of that. But that was their first time. And you think about all the water that is around Appleton. You think about Lake Winnebago. We're just an hour from Lake Michigan. So many great water resources.
Right.
And that was the first time. So, that's the kind of experience that we want to facilitate so that people have that positive experience, and then they have that familiarity, and they feel confident going back and doing it again.
Well, it's nature, and everybody should feel safe in the opportunity to just go enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, it's not that they can't, but maybe it doesn't feel like they can.
Yeah, and maybe it was that their grandparents, were legally excluded from that space, right? And then, the next generation just didn't grow up with that experience, and they didn't pass on that habit to their children.
That happens.
That's super common, and that doesn't speak to any specific, barrier or policy that can address that, right here and now. But it says that, okay, we've got people who haven't had that experience, and how can we facilitate those experiences?
Are there any upcoming initiatives or events or engagement opportunities?
Yeah, we've got a few things going on right now. This is really our first full programming year. So we're really excited. We've got our outing series is continuing. So thank you to the Fund for Lake Michigan. We're facilitating quite a few wonderful outings for groups. We are also launching a speaker series. And so we are bringing folks with lived experience to speak about their experiences in the outdoors. And we're hoping that those can be spaces to facilitate networking between our nature professionals and our culture-based organizations, those organizations that are advocating on behalf of folks with marginalized identities. And so we really recognize that there's a gap there. Though, like so many industries, they're siloed. And the more that we can get that communication going, we can bring them together to the same space to talk about these issues, then that familiarity, that trust will be built. And trust is the foundation of all of this work. So that we're really looking forward to those events to be able to bring people together. And we are also launching a grant program for outdoor-based organizations to apply to do training for their employees, their volunteers, whether that be just typical DEI training or deeper cultural competency training. We want to support them as they try to learn how to better serve these communities.
So where can they find all this great information? Because when you both were talking, and when I came to this country, so I came from India back in 2015, I'll say. And then there was a park in Marinette County, and I went by myself because I just wanted to stroll around. And I remember there was one guy, I think he was intoxicated or something. He started hurling abuse at me. And I was so scared at that time that I never went back to that park. Mm-hmm. So with the fear, or maybe I was just looking at the time, maybe this time these kind of guys will come over there and maybe they will start doing that. Mm-hmm. So either I could have avoided the park or I will go in some other time. So of course there are experiences what people don't think of, or sometimes, oh, not this park, I'll go to another park. But these things happen. These things happen at subconscious level. So where can people get information about these events? Do they need to go to your website, your Facebook? Is it open to public? What's the way to register?
So all of that information will be at our website, which is ourmci.org, ourmci.org. And we will promote things on our Facebook page. And you can also on our website sign up for a mailing list where we will hopefully be sending out all of these opportunities. But if you're looking for, the direct information, if you're looking for an opportunity to collaborate with us or anything, my email inbox is open. It's Kyle, Kyle, at ourmci.org.
Is there anything the community can do to be helpful?
So, on the base level, I always encourage people to, just assume inclusion or assume belonging, in our public spaces. I think we often are trained, if you see something, say something about, this is like you're supposed to be vigilant for who doesn't belong. But I am trying to encourage with this program, assume people belong and give them a smile and, just give them that encouragement to be present and enjoy that space. And that's just a general cultural level encouragement that I give, because it's that look or that experience, like Andy just mentioned, that can really ruin somebody's perceptions of a space.
I love that. Can we just start with the place in which our community can be the most helpful is to help others feel like they belong in the space.
Mm-hmm.
That is fantastic.
Like, I want T-shirts that just say "Assume belonging." I want that.
We'll work on it.
Okay.
We're not going to work on that.
City billboards.
All right. Is there anything that you would like to include at this time that we didn't ask about?
I would say if there are any folks from the outdoor industry or from nature professionals or naturalists, any folks who, they feel that they want to do something, but they feel, maybe afraid of offending somebody, that they are concerned that they don't know the next steps, reach out and make a first step to try to learn and try to engage. And whether that's with our program or anyone else, make that step and that is important. And I say that because we've heard from so many folks that they're a little timid to start this journey of kind of learning and growing in inclusion. And we just want people to feel like they can make that first step, because that's the only way that we're gonna move forward.
I'd like to ask our community also that what I think you can do is, if you know someone out there that you think they might fall in this category, please refer them to this resource. Give them an opportunity to bridge that gap and to find community that's also maybe sharing those same feelings, and then maybe they can find their group that they can have that shared experience with.
Mm-hmm. That's the dream. We want everybody to have those positive experiences and to be able to enjoy our spaces as they would like to.
It's that time of the show. It is shout out time. Got any shout outs for us?
So I've got to shout out at least two people. The first is somebody who has shepherded this program from the beginning, and that is Carolyn Desrosiers at the Community Foundation for the Fox Valley region. She has helped us secure funding and keep this show moving for years now. So thank you, Carolyn. And the second is Lisa Cruz. She's our executive director at MCI, and she had the vision to see how inclusion in the outdoors fit into MCI's mission, and to really take a chance by bringing us into her organization. And so thank you to Lisa. She has just been a fabulous boss and a fabulous advocate for this.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to start wrapping up this episode. Appleton Engaged listeners, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for caring about another amazing resource in our community. Thank you for being a great community member, because if you're tuning into Appleton Engaged, you're a great community member. I'm just going to call that out for what it is. But we are a work in progress, and we need help. And that help, we need it from you. And what does that look like? Well, it can look a couple of different ways. If you, as you listen to these episodes, if you can think of any ways we can improve the show, please don't hesitate. Reach out to us and let us know any ideas or any improvements that you would like to see take place here on Appleton Engaged. Also, if you would like to be a guest, or if you would like to recommend a guest for Appleton Engaged, please reach out to us. And you can reach us at diversity@appleton.org. Once again, that is diversity@appleton.org. Also, there's also another thing you can do for us, and that is this. While you are listening to this amazing podcast, you can go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if you've got a few more minutes, leave us a review. What this does is it improves our analytics, and the better our analytics, the more eyes and ears learn about Appleton Engaged. We think we have something pretty special here, and it's something that really is impacting our community in a positive way. And the more eyes and ears that we can get in front of, the better results can be had.
Thank you so much, Kyle. These conversations and the resource you shared were not only insightful, but they were thought-provoking. And to my listeners, please do keep participating in the conversations and support each other and have that dialogue going on. And that's how we make a space which is inclusive, and we can truly call a space that we belong here, because nature belongs to everyone. With that, until next time, stay thoughtful, stay curious, and stay engaged.